the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is Connected.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of AVNation TV's Connected. I'm your host, David Danto, and what the heck is going on? We just had one of these nice little, lunchtime picnic kind of chats with all of my buddies here, and then no sooner do we get that one out on the air than Plantronics buys Polycom, and then we were kind of settling in from reeling from that wow announcement, and then we have the Cisco Collaboration Summit, and they put the dagger in Spark, and they're going to name everything WebEx, and then we just get the announcement this morning that Searchlight Capital is buying Mitel. So we kind of hoped it would be a stable market between Enterprise Connected and InfoComm, and it looks like that's other people had other things in mind. So I have my friends and industry colleagues with me here to talk about this just a little bit and give everyone some insight. Erwin Lazar, let me start with you. Introduce yourself and tell everybody how to reach you if they need you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Erwin Lazar, Vice President Service Director at Nemertes Research, and you can follow me on Twitter at IMLAZAR.
Terrific. Thank you. And David Maldo?
I'm David Maldo, founder and CEO of Let's Do Video, and you could find me at letsdovideo.com.
Terrific. And we have Tim Albright a little bit on the road today, building a studio. Tim, you're there?
Yes, sir. You can reach me at avnation.tv or on the Twitters at TD, Tim David Albright.
Terrific. And our buddy Simon couldn't or wouldn't make it. I'll let you reach out to him if you want to get the answer to that in terms of talking about this subject. But sitting in for him, no less an industry icon, is Tim Banting, all the way from the UK. Tim, want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, David. That's very generous of you. Tim Banting from Global Data. I'm the Principal Analyst for Communications and Collaboration there. You can reach me on Twitter at TBANTING.
Terrific, gentlemen. Thank you for joining. And let's parse into this a little bit, because I know you can see I always keep a very busy background I have with Pac-Man going up over there, and Underdog's been with me my whole career. But on this side, right above my thumb, as I'm looking at my self-view, that's the original branding for the Polycom Customer Council. And that little star over there, that was an award that I got from Polycom. So, I've been involved with the Polycom brand since way back in the day when everybody respected it. I'm sorry, no, that was inappropriate, and I don't want to do that. But they've certainly had their share of tremendous successes and not so tremendous successes in the ensuing days. And then Plantronics, which you guys know is an organization I'm very fond of, and we have a lot of the headsets that we're all using right now from them, deciding to merge with Polycom. I mean, that's kind of a real industry wacky situation. What are your thoughts about that? And just jump in and go. Anybody wants to go first?
I'll take the lead. I think there's a couple of things at play here. From the Plantronics perspective, if you're looking at where the market's heading, and more in our research, and I assume Tim's as well, we're seeing a very strong trend toward soft phones, toward mobile devices, people moving away from the traditional desktop phones. Plantronics is very well positioned there, but by buying Polycom, they get access to Polycom channels, Polycom customers. They can help those Polycom customers with that transition over to mobile. They also get, again, the strong footprint that Polycom has. I think Polycom is probably at a good point where for them to sell, given their market's going through a lot of disruption, not only the change in user behaviors, but big percentage of their customers are BroadSoft connected endpoints, and BroadSoft now being part of Cisco, and Cisco making it clear last week that they intend to win that endpoint business, put some pressure on BroadSoft. On Polycom, and then it's a wild west as far as Microsoft connected endpoints as well, where Polycom has a strong business. So good exit for Polycom, and I think good opportunity for expansion for Plantronics.
Cool.
I think that's really good overview there, Erwin. I think the other areas to sort of look at with regards to Polycom and Plantronics is their openness. I mean, as we move towards UC&C platforms or UC as a platform, there's a distinct need for openness there. Both vendors have very open devices. Polycom has sort of made that transition towards more SIP-based phones and has got a great track record of providing some great devices for Skype for Business. And what was also interesting was that recently at Enterprise Connect, Plantronics unveiled this fantastic mobile device that sort of had Qi battery charging for mobile phones with a dial pad and also integrated with Bluetooth for Microsoft Teams. So the sort of openness of both companies comes together to serve a really good market. I think the market opportunity is vast for that company.
Yeah, I think 5 or 10 years ago, I would have said this doesn't really make sense to me. I mean, Plantronics makes great peripherals. I'm using a Plantronics earpiece right now, but what do they know about infrastructure and cloud and everything else that we were expecting from Polycom? But Polycom turned into a great peripherals company again. I mean, that's what they're doing
Dave, go
now.
pick up the cat. She's upset. I mean, come on.
Sorry about that. He's recovering. But so now anyway, I think it makes sense. We have some synergies there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Tim, I'm sorry. I want to give you the last word too.
That's right. I'm actually going to completely disagree with David while he picks up his cat. I didn't get this, and I slowly even more don't get it. I understand people smarter than me that analyze the situation, and yes, Plantronics makes really great peripherals and have for years. And when you look at that and you compare that with what Polycom does, and they still do, yes, they do accessories, but they also are still heavily involved in connecting people through the network. Video collaboration, audio conferencing. There's probably, I'm going to guess, between 60 and 70% of conference rooms in America that still have that star Polycom conference phone somewhere in it, right? That's what they do, and so maybe I'm not seeing it, but this acquisition still doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Well, it's interesting because it's a non-traditional acquisition in my part, and from my perspective, in that it's and I've even heard them refer to it kind of sort of as a merger because they're basically equal-sized firms in many ways.
Okay.
But Polycom had been through some difficulties in terms of finding a market stance, and they've kind of come out of that right now. There's also a personality thing here, which I'm sure wasn't part of the decision, but sort of has an elegance. There aren't too many people that were as respected in the collaboration industry as Bob Haggerty, who's been on the Plantronics board for a very long time and now becomes the chairman of the board of the combined company, which hasn't been named yet. And having Mr. Haggerty back at the control of what was once his baby makes a lot of people feel good. In addition to which, in some of the dark days, I'll refer to it simply as that, when Polycom was trying to find its stance, they hired Plantronics' current CEO Joe Burton to be, who's been a guest on my show and is a good friend, so I don't want to hide that. They hired him to lead strategy, and ultimately, you can argue exactly what happened in those eras under the CEO at the time, but he never really had the opportunity to set that strategy or have it play out. So getting these two gentlemen back in charge of this operation has a certain elegance to it, like they're going to right the ship now, or they're going to get back in charge of what they never really had a chance to do. I think, though, you're really starting to see a polarization where there wasn't one before. Plantronics is, and will be creating hardware and software for any device in any system. But Cisco has announced they're going to start making headsets, which to whatever extent they're good or bad, or you use them or you don't, will bite into their use at the Plantronics use of Plantronics headsets on Cisco. And then, you're starting to see Plantronics get a little bit closer to Microsoft with this Polycom acquisition. So it's sort of a realignment of the, it used to be a term in the industry, ABC, anybody but Cisco. It's sort of a realignment of this ABC space, as I see it, with a lot of upside and a lot of synergies around making endpoints and telephones. I mean, would you guys agree with that?
I think so. I think David as well. I mean, you've got an interesting segue into which areas you want to cover. As you mentioned in the introduction, Polycom were looking for a suitor, and Mitel were meant to be buying them at some point in time. As you rightly say as well, Cisco moving more into the headset market or initial sort of forays into the headset market puts Plantronics and Polycom more of a, into more of the competitive category there. So yeah, it's interesting. Polycom were going to be bought out by Mitel. We've heard, well, today that Mitel are being bought out by a private equity company. So I guess that, David, leave it up to you which way you want to take the next section of the conversation.
Well, talk about it. What do you think about, again, I'd have to look at the name because I don't remember. Searchlight Capital. Yeah, $2 billion. I don't know who they are. They don't know who I am. Searchlight Capital buying Mitel. What do you think of that, Tim? And then Erwin, you had an opinion there as well. And
Yeah,
I don't think it's a big thing, but it's more change in our industry.
it's interesting. I mean, obviously, Mitel can't during these sort of legal proceedings. Like Mitel can't directly comment, so all we can do is speculate. Interesting company to buy them. They do, they've acquired or made investments in everything from Hunter's Wellington boots, rubber boots, and Jamboree, a UK company that sells child and toddler clothing. But you dig a little further and you realize that they also invest in rack space. Now, that's quite an interesting move if you can find the synergies between Mitel and rack space. Mitel are moving more towards a cloud-based model. Rackspace has previously provided SIP trunking partnerships with things like Skype for Business hosted in their data centers. So as long as Mitel and Rackspace can unite and share some common themes and strategies there moving forward under this new private equity firm, then there might be some great opportunity there.
Yeah, well, you have to watch out for private equity venture capital companies because sometimes they buy product types because they like the synergies between them, and sometimes they buy product types because, like your son or daughter, they have a favorite color, and they don't really even see the synergies. It's just part of what they like to collect, and we've seen both of those play out in our industry. Erwin, did you have some thoughts around that?
Yeah, and again, I think that's a good point. You tend to see a couple of different private equity investments. One is because they want to take it over and sell off the pieces and hopefully turn a profit, or others because they do believe in the long-term growth. And we've seen, I think, more of the latter as of late. And Mitel's going through a pretty strong transformation as they begin to move from a company that was very much a hardware on-prem sales strategy to one that's much more in the cloud. And as we've seen repeatedly, that doesn't necessarily look great on your numbers for a few years. So I think, it's helpful for Mitel. It gets them out of that business having to worry about quarter-to-quarter reporting and making sure that they're driving up the value of the stock price. And instead, they can think a little bit more strategically. And at some point, if they follow, I guess, the Avaya model, they'll emerge and maybe go back to being a public company again. Hopefully not with as much debt.
Cool. All right, so I know that at least three of you were at the Cisco Collaboration Summit last week as we record this, where Cisco did a complete rebranding of their entire collaboration space, chucking the Spark tool that many of us use and like, and renaming it Cisco WebEx Teams. They're going to move everything under the WebEx brand. I wasn't there, so I don't want to comment as much as you were. David, your turn. You want to take the lead on letting us know how you feel that's turned out?
Sure. I don't want to dominate too much. I have a lot of thoughts on it. I'm sorry, the guest is going to be here for this.
That's fine. We all appreciate cats. I'm sorry. I'm surprised mine aren't here, but keep going.
I really was. I was thinking this is a terrible mistake. WebEx. It's not a bad brand anymore. They fixed WebEx a few years ago. I don't hear complaints about it anymore. But Spark's cool. Spark's a cool brand. But it was pointed out to me that Spark's cool in our little industry. We know Spark. 100 million users every month know WebEx. I mean, it's a much more known brand associated with collaboration. And if you Google Spark, I mean, there's Spark laundry detergent, there's Spark seed grower, there's Spark sport water bottles. Spark's a pretty common thing. But the branding aside, I do like that getting rid of the capital E in the middle of the name. I don't like capitals in the middle of names, so I like WebEx. But I was sold. Okay, I'm good with WebEx being a brand. But more importantly, I like the products. I think there's a temptation to make everything an all-in-one, and you see they're separated with there's WebEx Teams and there's WebEx Meetings. And I think that was a really good move. I know, David, you and I debate whether or not the whole team workflow was even appropriate for enterprise at all. And that's another discussion. But I think if it is appropriate for enterprise, it needs to follow the same workflow that's working for it in small to medium. And that workflow is you're in Teams. And when you want to jump into a meeting, you use something like this. We're using Blue Jeans now.
Well, it's interesting that, and if we go back to that debate just for a second, then I'll let everybody else talk, that the Cisco messaging prior to this announcement generally was you need to be on our advanced team chat platform on Spark. Everything is there, Spark Cloud, the endpoints are there, everything is there. So theirs was take this leap of faith with us. And many firms did and had good experiences. But as I've pointed out to you, that doesn't necessarily scale for all applications, certainly not in large, wide enterprises from my experience. Microsoft's approach to that space is, guess what? If you're using our Office 365 cloud, we're just putting you on our Teams product, which, by the way, now everything is simply going to be called Teams, and everybody looks to Slack to figure out when Slack's going to rename themselves to be Slack Teams. But
Slack Teams.
we figured that piece out. But the strategy from Cisco has now changed in that if you want to do team collaboration, we have the WebEx Teams product for you, but you don't have to. It's there if you want it. If you want to simply do meetings or communication or collaboration in what was a more traditional style, we're now saying that's still okay too. So now that changes the team product's there when you want it, and it's a natural progression and it all works. But you didn't necessarily have to go there now. Now we've got other offerings and other products, and we're not going to be jamming it as much as we were before, which I think is a stronger stance for an organization to take.
Yeah. It's also a workflow thing. There's an expected workflow. If you and I were emailing, or we met at we meet in a physical place, we meet at a convention, and we want to have a video chat. The way you and I expect the world to work is I send you a WebEx link, or BlueJeans, whatever we're using at the time, and you click on it and join the meeting. The workflow you don't expect is I'm going to send you an invite to my team application. You'll join my team channel. We'll start chatting there, and then we'll escalate it to a video. That's fine when you're working with your teams, but that's not the way the world works with externals. We need a separate meetings platform because that's what we expect.
Well, and to take off on that real quick, David, is you're also looking at it from the standpoint of internal versus external, which is what David was talking about. But you also have to take it from a standpoint of a generational, and I'm not going to get into Xers and Boomers and stuff like that, but the younger generations, my kids and the people older than that, they have a fundamental ease of using technology, and there's nothing to them to start up a FaceTime or some other video application and spend 2 minutes, 3 minutes on that chat function, on that chat feature, and get to what it is that they're trying to accomplish, and then they're out. If you add, 2 or 3 more steps for that, the product is doomed to fail for the people coming up through the work ranks. Folks in their 40s and 50s and 60s, we've been invited to stuff our entire adult lives, right? We get it. We've got to accept the calendar invite, and we've got a thing, and this, that, and the other. We've got a link, and we might have to download something. You put that many barriers in front of somebody who has grown up with the internet and grown up with smartphones and technology, they're just going to say, well, this is stupid. I don't want to do this. I'm just going to, text the person or, video chat with the person using a secondary application.
Yeah, I think for me, sorry, David.
Let me just ask one question, and then please continue with your thoughts. In fact, you can answer the question because you were there. Was Cisco talking about their Apple partnership very much? Because again, the idea of what Spark was really good at when we're using it is that you could join it directly from your lock screen on an Apple device, considering their partnership. Did they stress any of that in talking about the new WebEx branding?
Not really, David, although what they did do was they did show a development in conjunction with Apple that used augmented reality on stage to show a Cisco endpoint device on stage and used WebEx Teams to sort of render that sort of augmented reality 3D image on stage. So there was something there, but there was a lot that wasn't mentioned. I mean, Cisco didn't mention anything about what it's doing with Tropo. It didn't really mention anything about Cisco Spark meeting notes, which was their work life acquisition there, which really sort of offers agenda items, note taking, task management capabilities. Everything seemed to be focused on. I almost felt like it was like the next version or next reiteration of unified communications, because everything seemed to be focused on video. Cisco clearly playing to their strengths there. I was a little disappointed in that Cisco did say that they were offering an insight in how they radically reinvented the way we work. And what they radically reinvented was the way in which the synchronous communication side of team collaboration will work, with simplicity being at the forefront.
Yeah, I agree with Tim. I think it was evolutionary more than revolutionary. The big, as kind of I think David mentioned earlier, now they're taking Spark and embedding that as a component of WebEx, and I think that's really where their big key was to go to market with not a standalone application, but you've got 100, more than 100 million people that know WebEx, that use WebEx, that now have hopefully have access to the Cisco Teams app. And I think another big part, David, you glanced over it a little bit, but taking that Teams name is creating an awful lot of I don't know, guerrilla marketing, confusion, whatever you want to call it. But I know when I went home that first night and wrote my blog post for our website, I had to keep differentiating. Am I talking about Cisco Teams or am I talking about Microsoft Teams? And so now when you're having that discussion, around Microsoft Teams, Cisco's going to get pulled into it. So clever naming convention. I'm surprised there hasn't been any legal threat, but I guess the Teams name is generic enough at this point.
I think the other thing we need to bear in mind, it wasn't just a rebrand, it was also re-engineering and redesigning the user interface. So they've done some really nice work there in terms of, I think they referred to it as democratizing moderation or democratizing meetings, in that everyone can mute someone, or some of the common issues with WebEx was passing the ball to a presenter. Now people can mute everyone or make someone a presenter. So there's none of this sort of someone is in control of the meeting. Everyone has that full access to those roster controls. So they've been new and improved. They also spoke about the capacity to display 25 video feeds simultaneously on an endpoint. I wouldn't want to see that 25 people all in a sort of Hollywood Square layout. I think would be very difficult to sort of manage. But they also spoke about 4 video feeds on mobile phones as well. So a lot of redesign in the user interface, which is great. But
to be clear, it's not just a redesign. I want to make it clear that this isn't just a rebranding. What we know is WebEx has not been rebranded as WebEx Meetings, and what we know is Spark is not rebranded as WebEx Teams. These are completely new products. Like I said, a few years ago, they made WebEx better, and everyone was okay with it. But it was still this screen share first thing. Yeah, you can click a few buttons and get full screen video. When you do a WebEx meeting, you got a quarter screen video and you got all that white space with those 3 buttons. The new WebEx is this. It's a full screen video experience. It's what we expect from today's current set of cloud video of services. And the same thing with Teams. It's not they didn't splash some paint on Spark. Spark is gone. And they reassured me that $100 million of developers money to make all these apps for it, they're going to still work with the new one seamlessly, but Teams is a completely new thing, which I'm pleased by, because I kind of felt Spark, it just never got there. It was just never a fun experience. So I'm glad that it is not just a rebrand, but 2 new products.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say that it never got there, because the people that adopted using Spark, in my opinion, really got a lot out of it. It was a tremendous leap for a lot of people to make.
We use it.
We use it. Yeah, of course we do. And again, I use it in my work every day, where I open up rooms specific to projects and everybody's involved in them. I uploaded some documents there today, but I also use Teams. I'd rather not get into a comparison of the two. I am talking about a comparison of the 2 ways of operating, where now for Cisco, clearly it's there if you want it. And for Microsoft, clearly it's now our new front end for IM, for video, for your front end to SharePoint and things like that. And they may be in the same position that Cisco was in, a year or so down the road, where they're going to pull back and say, no, we're not going to make you have to go there, but we have to see how the market forces play out.
Yeah, and I think for Cisco too, they also have that issue of, they still have Jabber, and now they've had Spark, so they don't really have that unified vision, I think, that Microsoft has put out there. I think one other point that seemed pretty apparent from a lot of the discussion they were doing around WebEx and the new UI that David referred to is Zoom is in their crosshairs. They talked a lot about speed of starting meetings, which has always been something I've heard out of Zoom, BlueJeans as well. So they are trying to, I guess, stem some of the bleeding from some of the competitors that have gained ground in the last few years.
I guess the other thing that is, this could be quite interesting, is by calling it Teams, you could say that we know that Cisco has got 130 million WebEx users at the moment. They could quite easily say we've got 130 million Teams users compared to Microsoft's Teams, which has 120 million team users as well. So you could say, look, we're better in market by 10 million. Sort of not counting or incorporating those Cisco Spark users as well. I think the other area that I was a little disappointed about was, the calling side of Cisco Spark, now WebEx Teams. There's been no PSTN dialing outside of North America, whereas with Microsoft Teams, that's been accelerated, and that's more of a global offering. We do know that BroadSoft will provide the sort of PBX capabilities to sort of counter Microsoft Teams, but at the moment there was no opportunity. They missed an opportunity to show how it will effectively compete in all but a similar name with Microsoft Teams.
What do you guys think of the position that Cisco is in? And I feel for Jonathan Rosenberg, a brilliant man, at Enterprise Connect, giving a presentation that many of us said, missed some punch. But knowing that they were going to come with this major change, less than a month or so later, was that a fair position to be in? Was it right to come up with this kind of presentation in their own forum as opposed to in one where they're competing with other manufacturers like at Enterprise Connect? Any thoughts about that strategy?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one to be in, because Enterprise Connect has hundreds of announcements from hundreds of vendors, and sometimes you're in fear of being drowned out by everyone else. Cisco have got a captive audience at their collaboration summit. I guess Jonathan may have been a little disappointed that he couldn't share some of the sizzle, but he did focus on some very key areas there around, again, rebranding around video mesh, and I forget what their breach lock, I think it was called, about the security around WebEx
trying
Teams
to raise the awareness around security is going to be a significant factor in these team conversations. I caught Jonathan's presentation around that online from the Collaboration Summit, and talking about how to invite guests, and when you want to add a guest, how you have to go to somebody else's domain and have them create a guest access for you, and it stays alive. And I think it's great to have a superior product with superior security. It's going to be difficult to get people to understand that because it's so complex. We get it, but it's going to be really hard to put that out in front of consumers in the industry.
Yeah, I guess it's like insurance, right? You don't know that you need it until you need it. So it's all well and good saying how secure your solution is, but until you actually get a breach, or there's a publicly reported breach of something, like on a Slack platform or on, God forbid, Microsoft Teams, then those sorts of areas don't get highlighted.
Speaking of Jonathan, he really shared some of the coolest stuff at the summit, and a lot of it is future stuff. Some of it's here today, some of it's not, but AI is not just a distraction for them. It's not just a shiny object that they're interested in. They're going really heavy into it, and it's going to be something different than just Alexa, business start my meeting. Jonathan shared something called the WebEx graph, and he was showing how, and maybe this is a controversial thing, maybe some people might be uncomfortable with it, but if it has data from my meeting room and from my email and from my desktop and from my phone, and it knows a lot about me, so instead of just send David the files for our meeting next week, it'll know which files, which David, which meeting. It'll really be this deep understanding. There was one really funny moment though. He met with the press to explain to us why they don't like to do consumer things, and it's not going to be, Cisco play Metallica and Cisco remind me to get my milk, and because that's what we want, one assistant. Cisco plan my meeting, Cisco remind me to do my milk, and after half an hour explaining why it's a completely different kind of intelligence, a completely different learning, I got it. And the first question from the press was, yeah, but can it remind me to get my milk too? And he was like, I just explained why we're not doing that.
Well, no accounting for the media and the press, considering
Yeah,
myself,
I think
sometimes amongst them.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a shame. To David's point, it was a shame that the demonstrations that we saw were more Siri and Cortana-like and Google Home-like in its sort of demonstration, because to say start a meeting when you've got a fantastic joint experience from many Cisco devices, they talk very much about their big green join button. I'd much rather press a button than embarrass myself by not getting it right with starting my meeting.
Well,
So
first of all, to correct you guys, it was OK WebEx start my meeting. It wasn't Cisco. So we're not going to have to all say Cisco in the room.
Correct.
But
it certainly wasn't Monica. It certainly wasn't Monica, which was
that's true. It's more. But
we
Tim
heard about.
Albright, let me go to you for a second, because we're all geeks and embedded in this all the time around the collaboration space. You're closer to the AV space than the rest of us. We have InfoComm coming up. Do you think any of these messages resonate and get past the geeky piece to where people, at InfoComm, the regular attendees are going to get this?
Well, yes and no, because what you've got is you have Avixa, InfoComm up until last September has been talking about the experience, right? That was the whole idea behind the move to the name Avixa, Audio-Visual Integrated Experience Association. And what you guys are talking about, whether it's OK WebEx or OK Cisco, and hey, send David the files from this meeting, is an integrated experience. It's making it easier for the attendees. It's making it easier for not just the CEO, but everybody having a meeting in whatever room. And I think that it's going to resonate. My question is, and this is not a knock on Cisco. It's simply an observation. They had their own meeting. They had their own show to demonstrate this. And according to Erwin and David and Tim, it didn't exactly go perfect, right? But that was their audience. Are they going to be successful in a environment with 1,000 other vendors getting that message across when they couldn't exactly hit it out of the park when they have their own captive audience?
I think that's a great point, Tim, because when you think about it, Cisco is all about simplicity, and things like using proximity, intelligent proximity on endpoint devices. Absolutely beautiful to be able to go up to any hardware device and take control of that if you need to. What wasn't simplified for me was the messaging at the event. There was so much to say. It was very difficult to boil it down into some succinct points. So maybe, Cisco's got work to do in terms of their messaging and finding out how that resonates with customers and where, in fact, it adds business value rather than provides, to David's point, a geeky experience that we all know and love.
It's also a mature market. I mean, they talked about most of their net new customers have come from Avaya, and Avaya struggles over the last couple of years. So it's similar to looking at the cell phone market, where what can you do to increase ARPU? What can you do to get more money out of your customers? So you upsell them video, you upsell them meetings, you upsell them additional functionality, hopefully AI at some point. I mean, thinking about the AI area, we've asked in our research, we've asked companies what their interest is, and it's one of those. It sounds cool, I'll look at it. Not top of mind, not pressing to go out and cut a check anytime in the next few months. It's got a lot of other things to worry about. A lot of security, privacy, governance concerns. It's one thing to have an Amazon Alexa sitting there that doesn't transmit any data unless you say, hey, Alexa, remind me to pick up the milk. But it's something else entirely to have an AI device listening to you going, hey, I think I just heard you say that John needs to complete this task by Friday. Would you like me to assign it to them? Or I think I just heard you say you'd like to see the fourth quarter sales numbers. Would you like me to pull those up for you? Definitely a lot more helpful, but also probably scares the dickens out of a CISO who's wondering, where is that request going? Where is it encrypted? What happens if it's attacked in the cloud? And people know that, Jonathan during his presentation talked about what if somebody heard, hey, we're going to buy BroadSoft, and that leaked out because an AI engine got hacked. So lots of real questions that come up from a security perspective.
Sure, and I think really, honestly, although there are a lot of other clients for AI on the market, Cisco is the only one that's out there right now that's really talking about this from a secure standpoint and building their own, with the Trupo acquisition and everything else. They're really trying to get this thing right. I'm going to be moderating at InfoComm the session about, hey Siri, hey Cortana and friends, what's going on there. And I've actually reached out to the Amazon people earlier today to see if they can help me get my Alexa, my Echo Dot, to be able to forward my slides at the show. So if I can pull that off, it'll be really cool. So I'm announcing here that I'm working on it. If anybody's got any ideas, let me know. But it is an interesting space. We're also going to have an article out, and that was Alexa behind me saying it didn't understand what I was saying. We're also going to have an article out See, we're going to have an article out on the show floor from Sound of Communications magazine, the AV IT report, with a lot of people's opinion on where that's going. So that's interesting. I'm going to start to wrap this conversation up, but by doing that, I definitely want to bring a little bit of kudos to David Maldo, who gets the award this year amongst us speaking here today. That he is going to be one of this year's Emerging Trends Fellows. Congratulations! You join Erwin and Tim and myself as somebody being honored as somebody who spends way too much time on technology and not nearly enough time with family. So congratulations that, and you'll have that award at the Emerging Trends Day on Tuesday. And then you're also moderating a session, right? You can give us a little bit of detail around that.
Yeah, it'll be on team workflow, team productivity, the stuff that excites me.
Terrific. And Tim, you're going to be in that session, right?
I believe so. Yeah, looking forward to that one.
Terrific. And Erwin, you're working very hard right now at something we've never done before at InfoComm with the IMCCA, is really looking at what the next generation of metrics are going to be, right?
Yeah, exactly. As you start to, the big question that our enterprise clients often have is, what do I get for the hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars that I'm investing in collaboration technology? What should I be measuring? How do I know if there's real business value here? Can I measure things like increase in productivity? And then also, the factors that you always have to worry about, which is how do I make sure it works and people are having a good experience? So we'll be talking about some of the changes in what are people measuring and how can they improve their analytics as they look at their collaboration investments.
Yeah, one thing we saw from Cisco, and I've seen from some other manufacturers that are going to be coming out at InfoComm this year, is it's more than just, is the room on and in a call? It's more than just CDR. There's now going to be who's in the room. Do I detect the faces? Do I detect the bodies? Do I have a count? Am I over, under my normal? It's going to be a lot more data coming in that we can actually analyze or let AI analyze and be able to make better decisions around collaboration and system.
Mm-hmm.
Terrific. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for this conversation. I'm imploring the manufacturers in the industry to stop making changes between now and InfoComm so we can kind of calm down and get used to that. I hope to see everybody that's joined us here at InfoComm. Obviously, I'm going to be there all week. It's the first week of June in Las Vegas. If you want more information about AVNation TV, you can reach out. If you want more information about InfoComm, infocom.org, imcca.org. You can always get me on Twitter, NJ David. And for everyone at IMCCA and AVNation TV, thanks very much. We'll catch you next time.